Okay, hi, so welcome to this video where we're going to have a look at examples of communicable disease. Now, if you don't know what a communicable disease is, please have a look at my previous video where we do cover the topic. Right, so this time we're just going to have a look at examples that you need to know for your exam if you're on the AQA specification. And the easiest way to split these up is by categories, so as to which type of pathogen causes the diseases. So we'll start off by having a look at viral diseases, right? Viral, that means that they are caused by a virus. Okay, now the first one, if you are squeamish, then apologies for this picture, but this is the measles disease. Okay, measles. So, what is measles? Well, first it'd help if I spelled it right. There we go. Now, the measles virus is spread, so it's spread by droplets. Okay, this can be via sneezing and coughing. Okay, the virus is contained in these droplets when you sneeze or cough, and it travels through the air. Let me just move this up. There we go. So it travels through the air, and obviously someone else can breathe them in. Okay, symptoms, as you can probably see from this picture, symptoms include a severe red skin rash, which develops after around 1 week. Okay, so that's after you have taken in the virus. Around about a week later, that's when you'll start seeing symptoms. Okay, high temperature and fever are also seen. Okay, sometimes more severe symptoms occur, such as lung infections or brain disease. So pneumonia, which affects the lungs, and encephalitis, which affects the brain. Okay, these can be fatal, right? So this can actually cause death. So it can be a very, very nasty disease indeed. Okay, and very likely you have already been vaccinated against it. Okay, so most people receive a vaccine for measles when they are young. All right, so that's one example of a virus. Another one, okay, which you can see here, okay, rather than showing the symptoms, we're going to show the actual virus. This is HIV, right? You've probably heard of this. It's a particularly nasty virus, right? HIV, okay, that stands for human immunodeficiency virus. You don't need to know that, right? This is spread via sexual contact, which includes sexual intercourse and other things as well, or the exchanging of body or bodily fluids such as blood transfusions, reusing syringe needles, etc. Right, the reason why I put blood transfusions there is if someone with HIV gave blood, right, and someone else took that blood, they would obviously obtain the disease as well, or they would obviously be infected by that virus as well. Don't worry though, that sounds really, really horrible. In order to give blood, you are screened for these kinds of viruses, and so therefore that doesn't happen. But if something went wrong, then that would be possible and has unfortunately happened in the past. All right, now symptoms include flu-like symptoms initially, but then can be quiet for years while the virus replicates. Right, so often when a person is infected with a HIV virus, they are unaware, and that can go on for years and years until they see quite severe symptoms. Right, so this is obviously a massive problem. What the virus does Okay, so the HIV virus attacks the cells of the immune system. Okay, right, and when the immune system becomes compromised, the body struggles to fight other infections. Right, so basically, if you're infected with the HIV virus, eventually your immune system can become compromised. Then it means that your body struggles to fight with other infections, and other things which normally your body would be able to deal with, it can no longer deal with. So even things like the flu become very dangerous for a person who is infected with HIV. Okay, so when the immune system has been badly damaged, this is known as AIDS. Okay, so the person has AIDS at this point, right? And that stands for autoimmune deficiency syndrome. So basically, once HIV infection gets so bad, the condition is called AIDS, right? But the virus is still called the HIV virus. Now, importantly, we can treat patients with antiretroviral drugs in order to stop or slow the virus from replicating. However, there is no known cure, right? So certain drugs which are given to patients who have been infected with HIV, they basically delay the process. So they delay the HIV virus replicating and causing the damage that it is actually going to go and cause. But there's no way at the moment of us actually getting rid of that virus and curing the person. Okay, and lastly, with viruses, we have a virus that affects plants. Okay, this is called the tobacco mosaic virus, or TMV for short. Right, you see on the left a leaf which is all discolored. It's got these strange yellowy brown patterns on it. Right, okay, so TMV virus affects many different plant species. Okay, and the symptoms, as you can see on the left, is it causes, it causes discoloration of the leaves, leaving a pattern which may appear brown, yellow. Okay, if you think the green parts of the leaves, the reason they're green is because they contain a lot of chloroplasts, right? So if they've been discolored, then those chloroplasts are not doing their job anymore. Okay, so the discolored parts of the leaves, can no longer carry out, or what's the job of the chloroplasts? To carry out photosynthesis. And if the discolored parts are no longer doing that, then that is a problem. Okay, so the discolored parts can no longer carry out photosynthesis. Which inhibits the production of energy, right? So these plants are actually going to obtain less energy. Okay, this leads to growth problems in the plants as less energy is available to them. Okay, so any process which requires energy, okay, photosynthesis in a plant produces glucose. Glucose is then used to obtain energy. Okay, that energy is then used to carry out different processes. If infected with the tobacco mosaic virus, or TMV, there is less energy going to be available because less photosynthesis is happening. This means that the plant is going to struggle. One of those major processes which requires energy is growth, and so these plants have growth problems. Alright, so that'll do it for the viruses. Next we're going to have a look at fungal infections. Okay, fungal infections. They are the ones, obviously, which are caused by fungi. Now, the first one we're going to have a look at or the only one really we're going to have a look at, is red-black spot. Okay, this is the only one that you need to know. All right, so red-black spots basically affects rose bushes, right? Rose plants. And it causes, as you can see, these reddy, blacky, discolored spots on the plant. Okay, so the fungus causes black and red spots to appear on the leaves of rose. Whoop, let's correct that. Leaves of rose plants. Okay, this eventually causes the leaves to turn yellow and fall off. All right, and now the fungi spread through the air and through water. Right, so through the air and through water, that's how these can spread. Right, you can spread the infection. Now this is a problem because as there are less leaves, it means that less photosynthesis can happen, right? So less photosynthesis is able to occur as the leaves are dying, which affects the growth of the plant. Okay. All right, and therefore, if farmers want to stop this from actually fully killing the plants, what they need to do is get rid of those leaves, right? So farmers must get rid of the infected leaves and destroy them so that the fungus cannot spread. There we go. Okay, they'd also treat the plants with fungicide. And fungicide is basically a chemical which is designed to kill fungus, right? And that will stop the fungus from reinfecting that plant. All right, next we're going to have a look at a disease caused by a protist. All right, so a protist, if you remember, is spelled like this. It's a eukaryotic organism, normally single-celled but not always single-celled, and they are parasites. And the disease which they cause is malaria. Okay, malaria, particularly nasty disease. Let's just move that out of the way to start with. All right, now remember that we said malaria is a protist is something which normally is transferred by a vector. Okay, so the pathogen is transferred, there we go, by a vector, right? The malaria pathogen, okay, which actually is called Plasmodium falciparum if you wanted to know the full name, but you don't need to, okay, is transferred by a mosquito. Okay, so what actually happens is other animals can be infected by this pathogen, and when a mosquito feeds on them, so it sucks their blood, then the pathogen, or the Plasmodium in this case, is taken in as well, right? So you're going to get the Plasmodium taken up by the mosquito, and then that is part of the life cycle of that pathogen. Okay, but what happens is the mosquito feeds on an infected animal, taking up the pathogen. Okay, then when the mosquito, okay, with the pathogen, so it's already taken up the pathogen, feeds on another animal, the pathogen is transferred to the animal, right? So the mosquito is feeding on the blood. It's basically transferring this pathogen to the bloodstream of the animal, all right? Now, malaria causes severe and continued continued fevers, and can be fatal, right? It is a nasty disease. It can cause death, and so therefore it is a problem. These mosquitoes are therefore one of the major problems. If you didn't have these mosquitoes, then the malaria pathogen would not be able to make its way into human blood, right? So, in order to prevent infection, okay, insecticides and mosquito nets are used in order to keep away the mosquitoes, right? Now, the mosquitoes are not the disease-causing organism. The mosquitoes, if you remember, are just transferring it, and we have a name for that. We call those vectors, right? So the mosquito is actually the vector in this case. It's transferring that pathogen from one place to another. It's basically the mode of infection. All right, here's one more picture of malaria. Basically, you have your red blood cells. This is in a human, right? These are obviously your red blood cells. Yep. And here you have red blood cells which are now dead because they filled up with pathogen, and eventually those pathogens burst out, right? Remember we said that protists are parasites. They basically feed off of all of the stuff inside the red blood cell until the red blood cell can't handle it anymore and dies, right? That's basically what is happening. So not very nice. All right, and so now we're going to have a look at some bacterial diseases. Okay, so bacterial infections. Okay, and the first one is Salmonella. There we go. I don't know why that was following me around the screen. So, Salmonella. Right, you would have heard of Salmonella before. Okay, it's often implicated in food poisoning. Okay, Salmonella can cause food poisoning. Yep, and it leads to fever. Okay, so high temperature, vomiting, and diarrhea. All right, the way that this bacteria is spread is through food. Okay, so the bacteria is spread by eating food which is contaminated with the Salmonella bacteria. Okay, so some food which has either just not been vaccinated or has gone off can contain this Salmonella bacteria, right? Often in the UK now, chickens are vaccinated against it, against the bacteria, in order to reduce this kind of poisoning. Okay, which is obviously a good thing, right? The chickens could have the bacteria while they were alive, or the food may have been prepared in conditions which were not hygienic, right? So in unhygienic conditions, that bacteria could contaminate the food, right? Even if the chicken, when it was alive, didn't have this bacteria inside it, it could have it in the preparation of the food. All right, the last bacterial infection we're going to have a look at is gonorrhea, right? Now, gonorrhea is considered a sexually transmitted disease, okay? So this is an STD. STD, which stands for sexually transmitted disease. Okay, it comes from unprotected sexual contact / intercourse, right? You actually can get it without full sexual intercourse. It could be some other kind of sexual contact, but that is how the bacteria is transferred from person to person. Okay, so symptoms include a burning pain during urination. Okay, so when the person goes to wee, there is a burning pain, which does not sound very nice at all. Okay, and also, equally as not nice, a green, yellow discharge from the penis or vagina, depending on if it's a woman or a man, right? So those symptoms are just not very nice. That is what happens when a person is infected with the gonorrhea bacteria, right? These symptoms come around fairly quickly, but the severe symptoms can actually lie dormant for a good while, right? So, not good. How is it avoided or treated? Okay, in order to treat, antibiotics are prescribed, such as penicillin. However, some bacteria may become resistant to the antibiotic. Okay, in order to reduce the chances of that, okay, the full course of antibiotics should be finished to reduce chances of reinfection. Okay, also physical prevention is possible by using condoms, right? So the use of a condom will obviously prevent the spread of this bacteria because it stops the exchange of those bodily fluids, right? Whereas unprotected sexual intercourse, you clearly have the exchange of those fluids. All right, good. So that is all the diseases we're going to cover. Just very briefly, let's just run through a list of ways in which we can reduce the spread of these kinds of diseases. Okay, so if we can reduce the spread of these kinds of diseases, then that is of course a good thing. So first one is hygiene. Okay, so being hygienic or practicing proper hygiene reduces the chances of contamination, which can spread pathogens and cause infection. Okay, makes sense. Things like washing your hands, right? You wash your hands, you're killing potentially harmful pathogens that may be on your hands, right? And then you may be going and touching something like food. And if you had some pathogen on your hand, even if that wasn't going to affect you because it's on your skin, once it's touched food, that could be taken in by someone else or yourself when you eat it, right? So hygiene is extremely, extremely important. All right, what else? Destroying vectors. Now, we've seen this already in the malaria example, right? So if the vectors which transmit the pathogens are destroyed, then the chances of the disease spreading are greatly reduced. Okay, that's cool, because if we are not allowing those mosquitoes, in the malaria example, to transfer the harmful pathogen to humans, because we're not allowing the mosquito to live, or we're keeping it away from humans, then the humans aren't going to be getting the disease because they need the mosquito, or the pathogen, sorry, needs the mosquito in order for it to be transferred. All right, next, if someone is infected with the disease, a good way to stop the spread of infection is to isolate them. Right, so isolation of infected individuals. Of course, this depends on the disease, right? If someone has HIV, you can't just isolate them from the whole of the world, right? Because if they're breathing, you know, you're not going to get HIV. What you would isolate them from doing is having unprotected sex with anyone else, right? Unprotected sex with someone with HIV is, of course, going to be spreading HIV. Whereas that person can be in contact with people, just not sexual contact of that nature, and that disease is not going to spread, right? So that's what we mean by isolating. On the other hand, if someone has, let's say, the flu, right, it might be a good idea to keep them at home. That's why if someone's really sick, then it might be a good idea not to get them to come into work, especially if that person is going to be working around food and stuff like that, right? So isolating individuals affected stops the spread of disease as it does not allow them to pass the pathogen on to anyone else. Okay, cool. All right, lastly, and this is extremely important as well, but we can't use this for every kind of disease, is vaccination. Vaccinating the majority of the population will stop those people from being able to contract certain diseases. This stops the spread of infectious disease, as even if they encounter the pathogen, they will not develop the disease. Alright, so in an ideal world, everyone would be vaccinated. In real life, not everyone can be vaccinated. It's just not realistic, but most people are. Okay, so most people are vaccinated against a lot of things. Some illnesses or some diseases, actually, there's no vaccine at the moment. HIV, going back to that, is an example of that, right? There's no HIV vaccine. Okay, so vaccination works very well for certain diseases. We saw and spoke about earlier measles, right? The measles virus. There is a very effective vaccine against that, which most people have as children, whereas other diseases do not have a vaccine, right? So different diseases, there are different preventative measures in order to counteract them. Okay? So that was a reasonably long video, so I'm going to stop there. I hope that was helpful. If you do still have any questions though, please feel free to comment them in the box below or send me a direct email by using the link. As usual though, please like and subscribe because it really does help me out, and you will be notified when new videos become available, which is of course great. But thank you very much for listening, and I'll see you in the next one.